Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Tara McBride, Chief Marketing Officer at Prime Capital Financial. Buffered ETFs have exploded onto the investing scene, promising downside protection with a taste of equity upside. But are they as pumped up as they sound? Today, we unpack the structure, strategy, and skepticism behind buffered ETFs, and when you might want to swap them out for more traditional option strategies. I am once again joined by two of the firm's investment heavyweights, Will McGough, Deputy Chief Investment Officer, who's basically our portfolio power lifter when it comes to macro strategies, and Clayton Allison, Portfolio Manager, known around the office for keeping allocations lean and portfolios clean. Hey, if you're looking to bulk up your brain even more after this episode, make sure to download our free companion piece about retirement readiness. It's sort of like your financial gym buddy minus the awkward small talk. You can scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the show notes. Okay, Will, I'll be honest, buffered ETFs is a new one for me, so let's set the table for everyone with a very basic question. What are they?
Thanks, Tara and Clayton, for joining this morning. So buffered ETFs are strategies that help investors stay in the market while managing some type of downside risk. To do this, they create what is called a buffer zone, hence their name, buffered, which is some sort of defined downward move in the S&P or another index called 10 to 15% over a period, and then some type of upside cap from there. They hit the scene about 5 years ago. If you think what was going on about 5 years ago, it was COVID. So everybody was concerned about volatility and downside risks. So they've really become extremely popular since then. So they're just like structured annuities, a defined outcome, buffers, caps, a lot of words that we'll get into and explain here in a bit. But they're repackaged in lower cost, fully transparent ETFs now. That's been the key to their success, so that investors can get access to these similar risk managed features of an annuity without being tied up in an insurance product. So think of buffered ETFs, as you just said, the leaner, meaner cousin of an annuity. So they're going to give you some of the upside return while limiting downside risk.
All right, Clayton, so Will sort of set the table. How are buffered ETFs structured?
Yeah, no, he set the table perfectly, but like an annuity, it's a lot more complex than just straightforward. So it's great they're all wrapped into an ETF, so you kind of get this predetermined outcome. But the way that they're going about structuring these is they're actually using complex derivative strategies to really kind of bake in that return profile. So very commonly, like Will mentioned, you're going to have pretty much an upside capture cap that a lot of people are going to be looking at when they're picking one of these ETFs, and then a downside buffer. So a very common one is you might see that if you pick one of these ETFs, your upside is capped at 10% against whatever benchmark it's going against, let's say the S&P 500. But at the same time, you'll have a 15% buffer zone, so you can't lose more than 15% over this predetermined time period. Now, the way that they're going about doing this is using a variety of option contracts to really bake in that profile. So very commonly, you'll see 4 different legs. You'll buy a long call option and then sell a call against that. So the long call option gives you your upside performance return. Selling the call option then caps that return upside. But then they do it on the same thing on the downside by buying a long put that establishes your buffer zone, and then selling a put option to reduce the cost of that. So while it's great, you can kind of just go out, pick that ticker, get a ETF that's going to give you that return profile. There's a lot more going underneath the hood than a lot of people expect.
Yeah, they sound a little more complicated than like your typical investment strategy. So why have they grown in popularity, Will? And why do some firms think less favorably of them or even poorly of them?
Yeah, so the reason we chose the topic for this week's conversation is because they've become very polarized in our industry. There's 2 camps, the haters and the lovers. We've kind of talked about their benefits and why people may like them, so let's discuss the critic side of the equation here. So unfortunately, we don't have Scott Duba, our president of wealth management and CIO. He went to Chicago Booth, so he's rooted in academia, finance. The CAPM formula was created in Chicago Booth. And so a lot of folks that come from that camp of academia, Cliff Asness at AQR, for example, don't find efficacy in buffered strategies over super long-term periods when they're doing their academic studies. And they're kind of right, because these buffered strategies are defined. They have a start and an end and a buffer and a cap. And so it makes it very hard to model from a long-term practitioner standpoint, which is the root of academic finance. The people that like buffer strategies are more on the behavioral finance side of the equation. They're working with clients. They're looking at managing some type of outcome. And if you want to manage an outcome, there's no better way to do it than to have that outcome defined, which is a buffered strategy. You have a start, you have an end, you have a buffer, and you have a cap. So you know what you're getting into. I actually think both sides are right. So a long-term asset allocation, buffered strategies are hard because of their mechanics, but client by client working with financial advisor, they could have some merit in a portfolio.
Yeah, so it sounds like just like most investments, it really depends on the investor and the goals and strategies that fit their unique circumstances. So how do they play a role in our models or allocations? Will, Clayton, both of you jump in.
Yeah, so since I was just going on our models, I'll hit on it there. So we build asset allocation for over 15,000 clients for 220 plus advisors. And so it's hard from a home office model standpoint where we have clients coming and going from those models based upon their timing to have some sort of defined product in a long-term multi-asset asset allocation. But client by client, advisor by advisor, think of them as like working out with a trainer. A buffered ETF helps manage some of the characteristics of your portfolio, just like you would with your workout plan, so that the client can stay invested without taking on a full load of risk. I think it just gets back to a risk return equation. Clayton and I were looking at some numbers this morning, and some of the more popular buffered ETFs kind of look like a 60-40 portfolio. And so to me, it's all about getting your risk and your return set correctly with an asset allocation. And if these strategies can help you client by client in a unique situation, certainly a very good part of a portfolio. But from a organization-wide long-term asset allocation, it's tough. That said, there are some approaches where you can have models that are with the same type of periods as buffer strategies, which is something that could be of interest as well.
Yeah, just piggybacking off Will said, I think it really depends on the client and their particular risk profile. That's why it's so important getting with your particular advisor and hashing that out between the two of you. Because, like you said, you can't really manage that on a long-term basis across so many different accounts, so many different client bases. But for a very particular client that wants to know exactly what their predetermined kind of outcome is going to look like, it could be a great solution. But it's really going to vary case by case.
The headline always with our videos seems to be talk to a professional, especially when you start to get into these more complex kinds of strategies. Talk to somebody who understands them and can help you. That's a fantastic message. Thank you both. That's a wrap on today's chat. Hopefully we helped you, the audience, press some heavy questions and tone up your knowledge on buffered ETFs. I know I feel a little stronger today. Remember, just like skipping leg day, ignoring nuances of these investment tools can leave your portfolio a little unbalanced. So whether you're flexing new allocations or sticking to old school options, make sure you're training with the right strategy for your goals. And don't forget to grab your free companion resource either by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the link in the show notes. Think of it as your post-workout recovery shake for retirement prep. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to stay informed, stay invested, and as always, we'll be here to help you navigate the twists and turns of the market. Until next time.